This is the part where it all begins. And I don't know which way it's going to go, all right? But I have a room full of people, and I have to tell them something about Sickles that they don't know. But the mysterious stuff writer is here. You too? You showed up too? Longstreet. Oh, God, messed up my whole routine. People dropping phones around here, everything. Lord have mercy. Oh, hey. We'll be going in just 1 second. All right, here we go. The amazing Matt. There you go. Gallery over here. That's John Wayne's kid over here. We had a kid here a couple weeks ago. It was such a fine presentation that he was up there by Miss Amy. Miss Amy's here, Angie, about 3 rows below you. Anyway, the ranger, whoever it was, out of town guest, paused in between speaking, and I was standing up here, and I was like, who is snoring over there? Some kid laid out across the, so I don't know. Yeah. All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about Dan Sickles and the New York Monument Commission. Now, in true Ranger fashion, I had to give the title for the program before I actually wrote the program. So my intentions were to talk about the New York Monument Commission. What I ended up with, or what interests me in the end, I should say, I could give you all these stats about and I will, about monuments and all this stuff. But my objective here, secondary objective or primary objective or dual objective, is to try to show you what Dan Sickles did with the New York Monument Commission, what Dan Sickles' opinion, his opinion, was of the Battle of Gettysburg, and number 3, try to show you what Dan Sickles was like as a person. And the title does not reflect that, but it does reflect that the talk centers on the post-war years. Okay? So if I'm wandering around or not talking about the New York Monument Commission, that's the reason right there. In 1886, New York, the state of New York, created a Monuments Commission and named Sickles the head chairman. Here in this great task of his life, he would serve beside fellow New Yorkers Henry Slocum, Joseph Carr, and Charles Richardson to honor the men from the Empire State, the largest percentage of any northern state killed or wounded at the Battle of Gettysburg. During the course of his work, he would direct the erection of the New York State Monument, which is today in our National Cemetery, and scores of other smaller monuments, and along with the supervision of sculptors, artists, surveyors, engineers, and foundries. From the work of his commission with New York sprouted granite and bronze symbols of men who strode in battle decades before and which still stands to this day. Sickles would also oversee a comprehensive 3-day map and also make sure that his men, those boys in blue that have fought beside him, would attend reunions and monument dedications and be fed and housed. Sickles devoted countless hours and gave everything he had in this role or in this endeavor. But Sickles, to make the understatement of the program, was a complex man. And one thing that always was in the back of Sickles' mind was his legacy. You want to understand Dan Sickles, what does a politician care most about? He cares most about his reputation, right? That will stop the comments there. So how would history remember Sickles or remember himself and the decisions he made on this battlefield? So this, ladies and gentlemen, is a story of Dan Sickles and the post-war years. So before that, how many of you, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but how many of you, and this is fun for me, I hope I have a few here, how many of you have never heard the story of Dan Sickles before? Anybody in the crowd? Pirates? Who else? You're not gonna, girlfriend not gonna raise her hand? You're not gonna be that guy. All right. Right there. So, there's two significant things to Dan Sickles in his life. Two major events that define his life. Well, he wouldn't agree with that, but to me it is. There was an incident in 1859, which if you don't know, keep laughing, Matt. If you don't know the story, I don't want to get in front of it, but it's one of the most amazing U.S. history stories or jurisprudence stories from our nation's history. You got to hear this. And then number two, I would think the seminal event of his life was Gettysburg. And the decision, now we're going to spend more time on Gettysburg and the park and everything, but you will never understand Sickles without understanding the backdrop. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of you have commented when I went around today and greeted all of you about this white appendage on the front of my face right now. And a lot of you are probably wondering what happened to 52-year-old Matt, what made him prematurely gray like that or white like that. Well, there's always a good reason for everything. So the first reason you're about to find out, and in order to give you a hint of why I'm prematurely gray right here, we would like to welcome Miss Emma Atkinson to tell us about the murder in Dan Sickles right here. All right. Now, my original plan was to set them down and to tell them the story myself. But before I even got out of bed, on Sunday mornings, they come rushing up the stairs, all right? And so when they came in the bedroom, they piled in, and I told them my story while I was laying there, what I intended to do, and they just said, "No, Dad, we'll just read it." I said, "Okay, all right." So out went the story I did. Now, for those of you that are Gettysburg aficionados or Sickles aficionados, I'm simply using Wikipedia. Okay, I got it. All right, let's take a deep breath. Let's relax a little bit. It's going to be fine. Okay, so, all right. So Miss Emma is going to tell you about the murder. Okay, let me get beside you so maybe you can hear them. Okay, go ahead. I'll hold it.
Okay, so in 1859, Sickles was arrested for murder. His wife had turned to another man for attention. This was Francis Barton Key, son of Francis Scott Key, which wrote the Pledge of Allegiance. Star Spangled Banner.
Yeah, just keep reading.
Okay. Sickles repeatedly shot Key in front of his home, which was also in front of the White House. Sickles had a team of lawyers representing him, led by E. Edwin and Stanton. Future Secretary of War. It says state, but it's war.
There you go.
Under Abraham Lincoln. Sickles was released on what the first successful plea of temporary insanity. Sickles already had a questionable reputation, but his incident made him a pariah. Sickles saw the outbreak of the Civil War as an opportunity to save his reputation.
show you, okay, so that's this. That's this side right here. And to show you what causes the other half of, of prematurely graying here is none other than Miss Aubrey Atkinson, who will be coming up here right now. We used the curling iron this morning. Worked hard on this hair. Right here, let me find where you start reading here. We're down here somewhere. Major General, let's get Major General here. You won't get it, or you just won't read it. Okay. Now I know, wait a minute. I need, just nothing to do with you. I know what's being said, all right? I didn't change it. It's all part of the, all right, so, nothing. All right, go ahead, okay. It's just, I thought it was too good to change. Go ahead, all right, start reading.
On June 27th, Hooker resigned as commander of the Army of the Potomac. Among the corps, commander suggested to replace him, the New York Herald actually suggested Sickles as the best commander for the job. On June 28th, 3 days before the Battle of Gettysburg, Lincoln appointed General George G. Meade to replace Hooker. On July 1st, the first day ended in Confederate victory. Meade worked to quickly put his forces in place for the next day battle. Early on the morning of July 2nd, Meade sent a message to Sickles with the instructions to place his 12,000-man corps on Sedimentary Ridge. He was specifically ordered to connect to General Winfield Scott Hancock, his 2 corps on his right, and extended his line to Little Round Top on his left. Sickles, not impressed with his new commander or his orders, rode to Meade's headquarters about 11 a.m. and waited to see Meade, but the commander was busy at the time. Feeling ignored, Sickles returned to his troops. He decided he did not like his orders. A mile to his front was Emmitsburg Road, which was higher ground than he assigned to occupy. He also did not like the fact there were rocks and trees among his line. Sickles, without orders or without informing the other corps commanders, moved his corps forward about 1 mile. This left Hancock's left flank completely open and a large break in the line, where his corps was supposed to be. The new position he chose was wider than one he abandoned, and he did not have enough men to cover it completely. The middle of his line formed a silent, a right angle in the line that could be attacked from 2 directions.
Pause right there. I should have done this. Sorry, we're not keeping up with the slides. What do you think about Dapper Dan, huh? That right there, that's nice, huh? So this is Mrs. Sickles. I gotta catch up with my slides right here. She was 16, he was 32 when they got married, and she was 20 at the time of the incident, right there. So I take it she's about that age, right there. And of course, this is Philip Barton Key, who was the district attorney of Washington. So you have actually 2 lawyers, one lawyer shooting another lawyer is what you have right there. there you go. And so, anyway, getting to where Emma is. I put this on here. I didn't know if any of you have seen this, but this is, it didn't show up too well, but this is the best I can do getting the whole page. This is Sickles' home, this is Sickles' home on Lafayette Square in Washington. This is what the house looked like. And that is a depiction of Philip Barton Key talking to Mrs. Sickles. You can't make her out, but she's in the window up there. And they used to rendezvous with that. Anyway, they had a house which they would rendezvous a couple blocks away. That's one thing this program taught me. I thought the rendezvous house was across town, like maybe in Georgetown or something. But no, it's like 2 blocks from Lafayette Square down in Washington. So that was kind of neat. But this was the house. Mrs. Sickles would enter from the rear, apparently. And I'll leave y'all to read the confession, but for the 1800s, it's quite set low expectations. But she's pretty clear of what happened, you know. I don't know what Sickles thought when he said, and this is Sickles being shown his new accommodation. Which quickly he told the jailer he couldn't handle the rats, so the jailer gave up his apartment so Sickles could stay. Anyway, getting to the point about what Aubrey is talking about. Sickles is ordered to occupy this position, and he subsequently, on his own initiative, she's going to finish the story, is going to move out to the peach orchard. And when she says salient, that's what they're talking about. See how the flank is in the air and it goes along Emmitsburg Road right here? Okay, okay, so let's start with the middle of his line. Yeah, the middle, right there.
A right angle in the line that could be attacked from 2 directions. Brigadier General Harry Hunt, the artillery chief, inspected the new position with Sickles and pointed out the problems. He said he had to check back with me to see if the orders have gave Sickles could be changed. Sickles made the move anyway. Within an hour, his entire 3 corps was nearly wiped out by Confederate General James Longstreet's corps. Sickles himself was nicked by a cannonball which shattered his leg. He was carried off the field and his right leg was amputated a few hours later. His injury may have saved him from court material for disobeying orders, but his days as a field commander were at an end.
No pressure there. So the girls were coming out with me on some Sundays this past summer for the black powder. I wouldn't have to come in all day, and I come out and do 3 or 4 hours on Sunday and go home, since it was not my normal day off. But that's where we got started. I had them get up in front of the crowds and start doing the safety message, this past winter. So they're slowly, just like Ben did, if you look in those things, they're slowly acclimating to getting out here. Thank you, ladies. That was very, very good. So the murder, just to fill in a few gaps that wasn't in Wikipedia, the murder took place on February 27th, 1859. It was a 3-week trial. You never see this today, but they convened a trial. The court apparently was seasonal, and the court happened to be in session when Sickles shot Keyes, so they were able to move to a quick trial. And the trial took place in April, 1st of April. It lasted for 3 weeks, and returned with a verdict on April 26, 1859, saying that Sickles was not guilty of murder due to temporary insanity. Right there, all right? I could do the whole program, and then one day, there's so many good ideas you could do here. Maybe one day we'll do the whole program on Sickles and the murder trial. If I can ever get permission to do 1859, One of the curious things moving to the Civil War, though, ladies and gentlemen, is that if you don't know, I would love to know who you are. None of you raised your hand except for the brave pirate fan over here. Is that you got nothing to lose. The, Cam's just worried about me picking on him. This strangest thing, I could spend the whole program on this, but Sickles' leg was amputated down here, we think by Jim Hessler's book. I basically went through all 4 biographies. Pynchon, if I'm Pinchon, if I'm saying that correctly, has a lot on the post-war years. Mr. Hessler, though, says that the evidence that his leg was amputated by the outlets is kind of vague. It may have been at a hospital and then moved. He was moved out to there subsequently, or it may have taken place at that farmstead right by the outlet. I don't know. But anyway, the point is, Sickles saved his leg. And now you today, the American taxpayer, are the proud owner of Dan Sickles' leg. This is Sickles on the left visiting his leg, right here. He became very perturbed when they didn't keep all of it, because he had almost a complete hip amputation. We sit here and Dan Sickles, we're going to have a lot of laughs here today, but Dan Sickles had an almost complete leg amputation, which is very, very, very hard to survive. The higher the extremity on the limb, the less the probability of survival. And Dan Sickles? Never. They put a bucket above him. I don't know why I'm telling you, but they put a bucket above him that was leaking, and they let that water drip on his stump all the time. Whatever it did, it kept it clean. All right. So anyway, going to the post-war years. From 1865 to 1867, he commanded the Department of South Carolina, the Department of the Carolinas, the Department of the South, and the 2nd Military District. Basically the same thing, but they just kept changing the title. In 1866, he was appointed Colonel of the 42nd U.S. Infantry, Veteran Reserves, and in 1869, he was retired with the rank of Major General. Sickles served as the U.S. Minister to Spain from 1869 to 1874, and he took part in the negotiations surrounding the Virginius affair, which I had never heard about. So I looked into it. So very briefly, I bet Carlton knows about the Virginius affair. The Virginius affair resulted from an American ship that was captured by Spain attempting to run in Cuban revolutionaries to overthrow Spanish rule on the island. Well, the local governor didn't like that. And before Washington and, is that Madrid? Who's the capital of Spain? Before they could get involved, the governor took care of the problem. All right? And he ended up shooting 53 men as pirates. Yeah. And America was not happy. Washington told Sickles, meaning the capital, told Sickles to get after the Spanish government about it, and guess what? Since he was over there, he did. And Sickles cabled to Washington saying that he was promoting war. In other words, he was right in the Spaniards' faces, telling them that this ain't gonna do. Meanwhile, unknowns to Sickles, the Secretary of State, Hamilton Fish, was negotiating directly with Spain and circumventing his ambassador, Sickles. Well, it's probably good that Hamilton Fish got involved, because they prevented a war. Because Sickles was sure getting one. And Sickles resigned and came home in a huff. And that sets us up for the New York Monuments Commission. Now, while he was over there, ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to know that Dan Sickles, I don't know my Spanish history, but apparently there was a revolution in Spain and they deposed the monarchy. And so the Queen of Spain fled to Paris, where she was in exile. And from there, I don't know how often, how frequent, it's not really germane to this, Chris Gwynn would like that, germane to this program, but Sickles would travel from Spain to Paris, where he took up, reportedly, well, it wouldn't be an affair. What would it be an affair? Was she dead by then? I can't remember if his first wife was dead by then. It wouldn't matter anyway. He took up a relationship with the deposed Queen of Spain. And ladies and gentlemen, you are about to be, without me having to say anything, we'll see. Sickles has a lot of negative qualities, but as you are about to see, ladies and gentlemen, he also had a very patriotic quality to him also. As you can see, right here, Sickles put country before self. This is the Johnny Carson moment where I don't say anything. You know, just sit there and just like, yeah. Well, you know what they sang? This will give y'all fits trying to find this one. You know, I think Sickles needed a woman about twice my weight, right? A lot of fun. Who packs a gun with all that other freight? Find her in a sideshow. Leave her in L.A.? Never mind. Y'all can figure that out. One guy ought to know it, though. The hippie better know it. Apparently she, in her mind, though, I don't know if Dan Sickles stood out. She apparently had a lot of, I don't know what you call it on a royal level. Consort? I don't know. But Sickles was one of them. Now this lady right here, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Her name is Senorita Carmina Cray. I hope I'm saying that. Creagh. And I can't pronounce this, but she was the daughter of Chevalier de Cray of Madrid, a Spanish counselor of state. And Sickles, she was part of the court of Queen Isabella. So ask me how that all works, how you get from the queen to the lady in waiting and all that. But Sickles ends up marrying this lady in 1871 is what you need. Now you remember that because I'll be back to her in a little while. They had 2 children together, and he returned to the United States, Sickles did, in 1874 and began to practice law again, where he also became sheriff for a brief period of time. If you can imagine, Dan Sickles is the sheriff. But the important thing for you to remember before I leave her is she is left in Europe. I would assume Spain, but she is left in Europe. She does not come to America with Sickles. So Sickles' 2 children are in Europe. His wife, Sickles, returns to America alone. As stated previously, New York had created a Monuments Commission in 1886 with the stated goal of the commission was to, quote, determine such positions and movements by means of such records, reports, maps, and surveys as may be had, and by such other aids and means as they may judge necessary therefore, and report to the legislature recommendations to secure the permanent marking of the movements and positions of such troops. Only a lawyer could write such a one sentence. Sickles would use his position as chairman of the NYMC to help secure his version of events of the battle. Time and again, both in personal statements, public speeches, or newspaper interviews, Dan Sickles never wavered from his opinion that his forward movement at the Battle of Gettysburg had been the right one. One good example, in 1902, when the New York at Gettysburg volumes were published, many of you Gettysburg buffs probably have a copy of that, or soon will, right there. The history of the battle and its relations to Sickles' forward movement read like this. Okay, so Sickles sends out a reconnaissance in force. If you've ever wondered why there were Union monuments on the Confederate side of the battlefield, that's from Dan Sickles' reconnaissance on July 2nd. That's why there are Union monuments on West Confederate Avenue today. But anyway, Sickles sends out that reconnaissance. They bump into Confederates over there by the present-day Park Amphitheater. Confederates push them out of the woods, or they fall back out of the woods, and they come back and they tell Sickles that the Confederates are moving into position. Now listen, this is the quote. This is I picked this is a long paragraph, but I picked this one paragraph out of New York at Gettysburg because I can sit here and read to you all day long about Sickles' opinion of himself in Gettysburg. But this paragraph basically tells you everything that it is Dan Sickles' viewpoint. Is what I'm about to tell you. I'm not asking you to agree with it. This is Dan Sickles' viewpoint. And remember, he's a lawyer. So, he looks at things, he doesn't look at the facts. He looks at the law, which are two different things, okay? So, facts have nothing to do, all right? Where's the guy go? Right here. Yeah, see, he didn't even smile. It's cold, by the way. Okay, so New York at Gettysburg. General Sickles was confronted here. Do y'all want to read? What do y'all want to read? You won't come on. I'm going to read that paragraph right there. Let me take the microphone out. Yeah, just start with General Sickles.
General Sickles was confronted here with questions of the gravest character. On his decision, the fate of the battle might depend. His corps comprised that the only troops on that part of the field, and the fate of the the enemy was missing on his
Oh, you test. I forgot my glasses, darling. Point to
immediate front and
flank.
If he occupied
round tops,
he could not hold the ground between him and Hancock. If he remained where he was, the round tops would be occupied by the enemy, and his position became immediately untenable. Sickles goes on to say that the loss of the ground would threaten communications along the Eccentric road. General Sickles hardly hoped to withstand the onset where he was, but he could modify his position. Right?
That's it.
General Sickles, receiving no reply from headquarters, exercised the discretion customary in such cases. He decided to occupy the strong line from the base.
Strong line?
Huh?
Go, I'm just I'm mocking Sickles, not you,
Strong line from the base of Little Round Top to the ridge at the Peach Orchard along the Emmitsburg Road and meet the impending attack there instead of awaiting it on the lower ground, which the corps then occupied.
All right. Okay, so to rehash what he said right there is basically he exercised the discretion that was customary at the time, and he moved his corps forward. In other words, Sickles would go to his dying day saying that position which he took saved the Union Army. Okay? Now, about, I won't show for a show of hands, but I would imagine that we might have 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, something like that disagree with Sickles' move to the peach orchard. But as far as understanding Dan Sickles, the one thing you need to understand, ladies and gentlemen, is he never backed up. That what she just read, what Emma just read, is what he would go to, and he never deviated. I could give you that one paragraph in a different form multiple times. But Dan Sickles, the lawyer, never admits guilt, right? I don't mean to pick on the lawyers, but you have to understand, when I pick up, they're trained to look at something. They're different from historians, right? They're out to prove their point. Facts have nothing to do with it, right? You're out to win the case. Yeah, you know, so, and that's how he writes. That's the way he thinks. Now, Sickles did work, though. I don't mean to, to diminish that. As commission chairman, he had to resolve many disputes. In 1888, former Union Chief of Artillery Henry Hunt chastised him for the placement of Smith's Battery in Devil's Den. He became deeply involved in the 111th New York Monument's placement also. His tenure took him to other fields, such as Chattanooga. There's pictures of him at Vicksburg, Andersonville, Antietam, and Cold Harbor. One-legged Dan Sickles. Perhaps the peak of Sickles' performance as chairman was New York Day in 1893. On this day, the New York State Monument was dedicated in the cemetery, complete with the relief of Sickles being wounded. It's the only place you can find Sickles on the battlefield is the New York State Monument, at least a relief of it. And I believe the Lincoln Speech Memorial, isn't he on the back of that? His name is on the back of that too. But, so the 44th New York Monument on the Little Round Top, that's the big castle, and the Excelsior Brigade Monument, which is out near the Peach Orchard, was also dedicated. However, besides the monuments, perhaps the biggest thing Sickles accomplished was bringing attention to the commercialization of the battlefield. Do we not still fight that battle today? Yeah. There's, look at Baltimore Pike. When the visitor center left here, they were fighting it back then, and they were fighting it today. Despite being on the New York Monuments Commission, as most of you know, Sickles never had a corpse statue erected. Why? That is open to debate, and there are many opinions on the subject of why out of 7 Corps commanders, only 5 of them have a statue here. However, in 1887, Sickles received an honor that lasts to this day. He had an avenue named in his honor, the longest one on the battlefield, Sickles Avenue. The irony is that his road would not exist today unless he had made that forward movement. Escapes a lot of people. Yeah, see, Sickles not a dummy. He knows what he's doing. He's got his eye on his legacy. Now, one of the interesting things to me about the NYMC is that from 1886, but mostly 1888 to 1893, check this out. Can you imagine this happening today? The state of New York, in that time period from 88 to 93, in 5 years, placed 86 monuments on the field. 86 monuments were dedicated. That's an incredible amount of work. Incredible amount. The question that begs answering, though, is what purpose did the NYMC serve after this? After it was all done. I don't know if I really have an answer for it, but I'm sure it has something to do with the commission, staying in a commission. It has something to do with a guy named Daniel E. Sickles. Mm-hmm. In his defense, though, the NYMC was probably still dedicating monuments on other battlefields. Now, they're pretty much through here at Gettysburg, but the commission remained. And when the commission remains, so do the funds. Mm-hmm. All right, Sickles remains in charge. Now, a couple little trivia here for you. I just thought y'all might find this interesting. Sickles did not shy away from controversy either. Of course, as you know, the 42nd New York Monument has given fits to first-time visitors here at Gettysburg for years. If I can remember, if I could recall how many times somebody's come up to me to the desk and asked me how many that they never knew that there were Indians at the Battle of Gettysburg, right? So Sickles, how did that come about? So it was a controversial monument when it was placed, and you also have to remember that it was controversy also with at that time period, when this is dedicated, with the 72nd Pennsylvania Monument. For those of you who don't remember, that's the famous one with the club musket at the high water mark, right? Everybody's on the back of the quarter right there. Well, if you know your Gettysburg background history, that monument is, as far as an erection of a monument, was probably arguably the most controversial monument in Gettysburg Park history, administrative history, because the 72nd Batchelder, our historian, wanted the 72nd monument back on the toll road, and they sued, and it went all the way to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And when they went to the Supreme Court, what did the lawyers do? They solicited testimony. And I'm not saying don't everybody go rush out to the bookstore to buy off all the copies of the case right there. But they recorded veterans' testimony about where the 72nd, and they got other people in there. It is a very good resource for the high water mark in July. Not that Sickles wanted that to happen. But here's how Sickles couldn't resist himself. So he's at the dedication of this monument. The 72nd still controversy, Pennsylvania's still going on. Here's how a gentleman takes a cheap shot. Quote, "I have the honor to place this memorial in the custody and care of your association." He's talking to the Gettysburg Battlefield Memorial Association. "I cannot fitly perform this duty without giving expression to the surprise and indignation felt by the veterans of this famous battalion when they see their monument standing in a rear line from which they advance and repulse the approaching enemy, whilst troops that refuse to advance," he didn't say who they were, "in obedience to repeated orders of their brigade commander, are permitted to place their monument on a line much further to the front than they ventured to march, until after the victory was won. I knew that the trustees of the battlefield are in no sense responsible for this outrage upon history." Later he said, here's another cheap shot. Later he said, "I don't know why those men were so modest that they would not advance when ordered." Oh my God. And none of y'all know. Anybody know who that is? If you know who that is, I'll die. I'll just walk out this door right now and y'all call that. That is sculptor James Kelly. Right there. Saying you probably are familiar with his work, but you're not familiar with who made it. He's got a lot of sculptures on this battlefield. James Kelly. Keep that in the back of your mind. Anyway, he's hard at work on these New York monuments. And to go back to the 42nd, I'm reading this to give you a sense of how Sickles conducted himself. Here's your glimpse into what it would have been like to be in front of Dan Sickles, personally. And you know, an artist, he captures things that nobody else does, even phonetically. Okay, so James Kelly was asked to cast the Indian for the 42nd New York. So there was a lot of controversy. According to Kelly, the artist, he was repulsed at the idea, but did not want to let down his friend, New York Monuments Commissioner G.W. Martin, in saying the idea for the monument was just plain dumb. Therefore, when he asked Martin how long he would have to cast, the commissioner gave him a month. In other words, this Commissioner Martin is trying to sabotage the whole Indian idea. This allowed Kelly, the artist who didn't want to do it anyway, an out, and he stated flatly he could not cast the 42nd New York in a month. At the meeting, though, was Dan Sickles. And Kelly recorded not only Sickles' response, but his enunciation. So when Kelly tells the commissioners he can't do it in a month, Sickles responds. This is Kelly's writing right here. There's a hyphen between each letter. What? Piped Sickles. Not do it in a month? Hyphens again. Why? If I were a sculptor, I could do it in a month. Hyphens again. All you have to do is to get an idea. A vivid I-dia. Right there. Now this is the way he described him, Kelly did. I mean the way he looked. Mind you, looking very sagely under his contracted eyebrows, then arching them, shrugging his shoulders, balancing on his crutches, throwing out the palm of his hands with the flourish like a French barber. You must just have an idea right here. And make it. He had it with a touch and go air of finality. Kelly replied, I'm not making that kind of work. Kelly closed with one last bar. Judging from the final monument on the field, Sickles, he puts hyphens in between all these words, must have made it. Carlton's still up there? Carlton came all the way down here. He could be upstairs, doing anything. But when we're going to talk about James Longstreet, he's going to come down. I'm going to tell you something. Carlton Smith. Nothing going to be said about Longstreet. I'll get corrected, too, when I go back to the office. He'll tell me everything I said wrong about Longstreet. One of the oddest friendships struck up at Gettysburg had to take place at the 25th anniversary of the battle in 1888. Sickles' old antagonist, James Longstreet, made a guest appearance. The two men met at the Springs Hotel, which former grounds just recently passed into park hands. Very nice. The golf course. The two grasped each other warmly and sat down to chat. Can you imagine meeting your opponent from war? Can you imagine such a thing, A few days later, Longstreet and former Chief of Staff Dan Butterfield toured the field together. Yeah. Wonder if they talked about Meade. They were joined on Little Round Top by Sickles, Henry Slocum, and Joseph Carr. During the time they were on the summit, the 146th New York Monument was being dedicated nearby. Upon the completion of the ceremony, the crowd rushed to be around the great men. They were later cheered on by the veterans on their way back to the Spring Hotel. Reunification, people. Can you imagine a Confederate veteran of Longstreet's stature, Lieutenant General in the Confederate Army, and a Major General in the Union Army riding in the same carriage? It's big stuff, people. We take this stuff for granted. This was a sign to the nation in 1888. It's time to go. It's time to move forward. 25 years later. And so they're trying. In Atlanta one year in the 1890s, Longstreet and Sickles attended a St. Patrick's Day banquet. When the two entered the hall, the old Confederate veterans arose and gave them a yell. I don't know what Sickles thought of that. Sickles offered a toast to Longstreet and made the amusing proposition that the old general would sing the Star-Spangled Banner.
Interesting choice.
Y'all ready to sing? No? Sickles noted that Longstreet's rendition wasn't that bad. He also, Carlton, what was the name of that song he stood up on the table and Longstreet sang in 61 with Earl Van Doren?
I Puritani.
I Puritani, that's right. You'll try to sing that one sometime. Longstreet apparently liked to sing. Afterward, with things running so late, the two could not catch a cab, so they walked back to the hotel, Sickles on his crutches. Of course, the two had imbibed quite heavily, and upon reaching Longstreet's hotel, Sickles said to him, Longstreet, The streets of Atlanta are very dark and it is very late, and you are somewhat deaf and rather infirm. Now I must escort you to your headquarters. Longstreet said, all right, come on, and we'll have another hand shake over the bloody chasm. And so to the hotel they went and possibly had another drink or two. At the conclusion, Longstreet said to Sickles, Sickles, the streets of Atlanta are very dark and you are lame. And a stranger here, and do not know the way back to your hotel. I must escort you home. And out into the darkness they strode. Along the way, Longstreet said, old fella, I hope you are sorry. Along the way, Sickles said, old fella, I hope you are sorry for shooting off my leg at Gettysburg. I suppose I will have to forgive you for it's Sunday. Forgive me? Longstreet asked incredulously. You ought to thank me for leaving you one leg to stand on. No idea, do you? No idea. Hang on, darling. Hang with it. Got makeup today, though. And he said, at the 1893 Gettysburg reunion, the two met again at Little Round Top. I think I got a picture of that. And so when they got to this, on this particular occasion, Sickles was helping Longstreet navigate the boulders. And Longstreet turned to him and said, Sickles, you can well afford to help me up here now. If you had not kept me away so long, on the 2nd of July, 1863, the war would have lasted longer than it did. Can you imagine judging such things right there? Isn't that cool? I found that one yesterday. I could hardly wait to put that one up. Look at that. Right there. Mm-hmm. Yep. Now, Sickles is not in this picture, and I'm not sure what year this picture is from, but this is Little Round Top. See? Yeah. Longstreet on horseback. And pretty cool, isn't it? I'd ask you to stand up, John Wayne, but I see you're a little busy over there. Yeah. Once in March 1901, at the second inauguration of William McKinley, what do you think about that one, Carlin? You know that one. And on May 30th, 1902, at the West Point Centennial, while reviewing veterans of the Spanish-American War, they shared the platform with Theodore Roosevelt. Yeah. That came out of American Scoundrel. It was their last meeting as Longstreet would die in 1904. But before he died, Longstreet gave Sickles what he coveted the most. In a letter of regret for not being able to attend the Slocum Monument dedication, Longstreet wrote, on that field you made your mark that will place you prominently before the world as one of the leading figures of the most important battle of the Civil War. As a Northern veteran once remarked to me, General Sickles can well afford to leave a leg on that field. I believe that it is now, I believe that it is now conceded that the advanced position at the Peach Orchard, taken by your corps and under your orders, saved that battlefield to the Union cause. It was the sorest and saddest reflection of my life for many years. But today, I can say with sincerest emotion that it was and is the best that could have come to us all, North or South. And I hope that the nation, reunited, may always enjoy the honor and glory brought to it by that grand work. Okay. You know how much flack Dan Sickles has gotten already? He's still alive. You know how much flack? Do you think that Dan Sickles, look, you may not like him, but I would not call the man dumb. He's a lot of things, but he's not dumb. He's a very intelligent person, I would say, in my mind. He's able to think on his feet, he's able to react quickly, etc. Basically, and as a lawyer, basically your opponent is telling you you did the right thing. If they had a lamination machine back then, Dan Sickles had this in his pocket, and he showed it to everybody that would listen. Look, Longstreet thinks I did the right thing. Well, who else you need if Longstreet thinks that? So, yeah, he had the letter reprinted, sent them to friends, all the Third Corps veterans. He used it at addresses. 9 years afterwards, Sickles was still sending out copies. Yeah. All right. Now, this is nothing to do with the MYMC, but I do think I wrote this down because I thought you would find it interesting. You want to know what Dan Sickles was like? I'll tell you. This is a good description. Joseph Twitchell, a former minister with the Excelsior Brigade and the best friend of none other than Mark Twain for 40 years.
Oh boy.
All right, that's Mark Twain on the left. Of course, over the course of his friendship with Twain, Twitchell recounted many stories of Sickles. And in 1906, Twain had a chance encounter with Sickles in his mansion in New York. In true Mark Twain fashion, he left a detailed impression of the general, who he recalled as a genial old fellow. It's what Mark Twain said. It's how Mark Twain writes, so it's Mark Twain. He says, "You couldn't walk across that floor anywhere without stumbling over the hard heads of lions and things. It was as if a menagerie had undressed in the place. Then there was almost a decided and unpleasant odor which proceeded from disinfectants and preservatives and things such as you have to sprinkle on skins in order to discourage the moss. It was a kind of museum, and yet it was not the sort of museum which seemed dignified enough to be the museum of a great soldier, and so famous a soldier. It was the sort of museum which should delight and entertain little boys and girls. I suppose that the museum reveals a part of the general's character and make. He is sweetly and winningly childlike. As far as speech mannerisms, Twain thought Sickles talked, quote, smoothly and well-constructed English. His talk is full of interest and bristling with points, but there is no animation in it. It soon becomes oppressive by its monotony, and it makes the listener drowsy." Wake that guy up. Yes, this is good. "Twitchell had to step on my foot once or twice. The late Bill Nye once said,"
Oh no.
you know who that is?
Bill Nye the Science Guy?
"I have been told that Wagner's music is better than it sounds." That fallacious description of something which so many people have tried to describe and couldn't does seem to fit the general's manner of speech exactly. His talk is much better than it is. Period. No, Twain says, no, that is not the idea. There seems to be a lack there seems to be a lack there somewhere. Maybe Nye would say that, quote, it is better than it sounds. I think that it is. His talk does not sound entertaining, but it is distinctly entertaining. Mark Twain. Now he put italics on not and is right there to get his emphasis apart. Now Mark Twain, Twitchell had related to the great author that when Sickles had been wounded at Gettysburg and not knowing whether he was going to die or not, had not related to a newspaper correspondent anything connected, quote, with the future world in order to get out of this one in becoming style. Twain further stated, "Now, when we sat there in the general's presence listening to his monotonous talk, it was about himself, and it is always about himself, and it always seems modest and unexasperating, inoffensive. It seemed to me that he was just the kind of man who would risk his salvation in order to do, quote, last words in an attractive way. And also I will say this, that he never made an ungenerous remark about anybody." Sickles didn't talk bad about people. That surprised me. He spoke severely. He did. He did, Al. He spoke severely of this and that and the other person, officers in the war, but he spoke about them with dignity and courtesy. Like a lawyer. There was no malignity in what he said. He merely pronounced what he evidently regarded as just criticisms upon them. Right there. Shouldn't have stayed out so late. I noticed then what I had noticed once before, 4 or 5 months ago, that the general valued his lost leg way above the one that is left. I am perfectly sure that if he had to part with either of them, he would part with the one that he has got than the one that he lost. In other words, Sickles continued to show off. It made it very apparent to Mark Twain that Sickles was very proud of losing that leg. That's what Twain is saying in his homely fashion right there. The loss of the leg did not damper, here's the part half of y'all been waiting on right here. Did they leave? The girls leave? That's good. Good. Not fit for his sleeping? No, they're good. The loss of the leg did not dampen Sickles' love of pretty ladies. Senior warden or otherwise. All right? Despite being married, he would have more conquest before his death, even when he was 90. Some of you older gentlemen need to up your game. Blue pill around then. Get up and start moving. Get a running start. Okay. Focus. So, one lady that caught his eye, and I'm sorry, I know y'all want to look her up, but I cannot pronounce his name. This lady right here, her name is Princess, I'll just spell it for you. L-W-O-F-F. Loff? Dash Parlaghy, P-A-R-L-A-G-H-Y, P-A-R-L-A-G-H-Y, Parlaghy. Anyway, she's the princess. She was born in Hungary in the mid-1860s, and her exact date of birth seems to vary slightly from one source to another. She was married for a very brief time to a Russian prince, giving her the royal title of princess, which she carried with her the remainder of her life. It was said that from her marriage she had an income of $1 million a year, which she apparently consumed without difficulty. Don't let your conscience bother you over there. The princess had become a renowned portrait artist even before her marriage, and she was good enough to be awarded a gold medal from the Berlin Academy in 1894. So she's no slouch. And her subjects would include royal figures in Europe and then military figures and celebrities here in the United States, which she first visited in 1896 and then again in 1899. Okay, here we get to where we're interested. An announcement was made noting that the princess was returning to America in 1908 with her menagerie of pets and would be staying at the Plaza Hotel in New York City. Despite lengthy negotiations, the Waldorf Astoria Hotel had turned her down. This is the Plaza, right here. While the Plaza staff may not have been thrilled with her animal affections. Despite her reputation as a champion for animal protection and care, the princess lived at the plaza in a third-floor suite. This is gonna make y'all feel bad about yourself, especially new couples that are starting out right here. This suite had its own chapel, 14 rooms, a private physician, a valet, a Swedish nurse, maids, cook, footman, butlers, 2 couriers, 2 attachés, and her animal companions for 5 years, perhaps to the dismay of the hotel management. If that didn't get you where you needed to be, her menagerie was said to have included dogs, cats, guinea pig, owl, and 2 small alligators. And if that doesn't do it for you, 1 bear.
This says there's a lion cub too.
Falcons
and a lion cub.
You're
Sorry, it was
again.
awesome.
Put the phone down.
She sounded interesting. I want a menagerie.
Well, ain't come around. Glad my daughters ain't around here. And this brings us, without further ado, to our Australian friends occupying the front row right now. I'm going to shot her stuff right so everybody can see over there, all right? This brings us to the cub, which was named, did you find out?
I'll have to go back to my
This was, no, before I show this. Hey.
I don't see the name of it.
Esther ain't got this. You ain't got this. Y'all ready? You ain't seen this before. Y'all ready? Huh? I got it. I can't believe it. I got it right here. Apparently in about 1911 or 1912, the princess developed a desire to add a lion cub to her menagerie. All right? This was likely a result of visiting the Ringling Brothers Circus, which she offered to purchase a cub directly. The circus politely declined. So the princess went to her friend, Mr. Dan. And guess what? Dan went down there with $250. Everybody's got a price. And Sickles went down there and got a cub, right? On April 17th, 1911, Sickles informed the press he would be given the 6-week-old cub to the princess in honor of his 50th anniversary of going to the war. She was summoned to Madison Square Garden, and Sickles, holding the young cub, said, "I want you to accept a souvenir of my regard." And I was putting this final touches on this program yesterday and going through all these internet, and lo and behold, I didn't even know this existed. There it is, right there. Wow, you know? You got that. Searching that,
No, it doesn't say
3 volumes.
That's the line.
The true, definitive story. Yeah. I'm more interested, I like the cub and everything, but what I'm more interested in is that hat. I mean, where do you get something made like that? And what kind of animal produced that? I don't know. Get a custom. What do you want? What would you like, princess? Oh, I just want it, I want a big hat. Make it out of mink. So, yeah. So there it is, right there. Of course, the princess ordered champagne immediately and even sprinkled some over the cub's head. Oh, you can't. They got the champagne. What are you people talking about? I got the champagne. This is the moment. Right here, I got the picture of it. You go around the world and not see stuff like that. Ventura's, 5:30, Fairfield. Tell you all about it. So anyway, there you go. Anyway, she takes up Goldfleck, tells General Sickles she's going to name it General Sickles, and walks out down the road, gets in the carriage, and takes it back to the hotel. If you can imagine putting a cub in a hotel, and I'm talking about money, people. She hired her own trainer for that cub. if you can imagine. It got out of the house one time, out of the plaza, and it was lured back into the room with a piece of raw meat. I don't know what's happening behind that mask. I think you found it funny. All right, so although the cub did quite well for some time, perhaps better than might be expected for a lion living at a hotel, Goldfleck became ill because he never adopted to civilized food. He developed gout and he died on May 21st of 1912. The princes held a formal wake with Goldfleck, reportedly lying in state surrounded by flowers, his toys, and dishes. He was buried because I won't be beat. You believe that? He was buried in a pet cemetery. And you can still go in New York City today and see the cub, the cub's grave. Yeah, isn't that crazy? Al's already typing on his blog and everything. Now Dan must have been quite smitten with the princess. After sitting for a portrait, he gave her the name of 200 friends that might be interested. If any of y'all can find that portrait, please let me know, because I looked for it. I could not find the portrait of Sickles. Maybe Jim would know. He also guaranteed her debt at the Plaza Hotel.
Oh, God.
In 1910, whoever said that's got it right, the hotel informed Dan that her bill stood at $5,500. 6 months later, the Knickerbocker Trust Company came after Dan for the bill because the princess had only paid $750 toward the debt. By this time, Sickles, who had blown through his own fortune and now had blown tens of millions of dollars from his father, was broke. He pleaded for time. In 1912, two banks initiated foreclosure proceedings on him in 1912. And Spanish wife Carolyn Cray, who would return to New York after 27 years of separation. 27 years of being separated. Now, I got a lot of couples in here, and I got a lot of veteran couples in here. Now, you imagine being separated for 27 years and doing this. When she found out that Sickles was in debt, she went immediately down there to basically a pawn shop and took her jewels and pawned them to raise money to pay Sickles' debt off. Oh, it gets worse. Because this is, now let me ask y'all who would tolerate this. She shows up in New York City. Oh, y'all are back. She shows up in New York City and none other, Sickles, you know, in Sickles' defense, okay, let's try both sides here. She's been gone for 27 years. Amen over here, brother? Okay, so she hasn't been around for 27 years. Well, Sickles went and got a housekeeper who accompanied him everywhere, Mrs. Wilmerding, who was his secretary. I know, bummer her name, but she was there. She was living with Sickles. Now, let me tell you something. Mrs. Sickles arrives from Europe, and she says, you know, I'd like to reconcile with you, Dan, but, you know,
She's gotta go.
Mrs. Wilmerding's got to go. And Dan, who's 90-something years old, proceeds to tell his wife, he's going to be the master of his house. If Mrs. Wilmerding is staying. So what ends up happening, I often find it refreshing, ladies and gentlemen, that in our time, with all the smut that you see in the news and people trying to catch, you know, people doing things and everything, America hadn't changed. They were doing this stuff back then. Mrs. Sickles doesn't move. She goes into residence a couple blocks away in a hotel. And the paparazzi takes up residence in front of Sickles' house. as the standoff ensues in the New York tabloids between Mrs. Sickles and Mr. Sickles and Mrs. Wilmerding. It's all playing out in the papers as it's going on right there. So I can't imagine tolerating that on any different level, but many different levels. So anyway, Olivia Carolyn, his wife, declared to a newspaper man, "I will not put up all my money to save his house to have it occupied by him and his housekeeper to the exclusion of me." Well, you did. However, even worse was about to befall the general. New York State Comptroller William Summer audited the New York Monuments Commission books for 1912 and came up with a discrepancy in the expense account of, can you imagine this much money being spent today, of $445,641 expended. Receipts only came to $417,165, a discrepancy of approximately $28,000. The state prepared to come after the treasurer, the commissioners, including the 93-year-old chairman, Dan Sickles. But one of the bravest and final acts of his life, all right, everything's coming toward him. But when you're on the board of something, when you get on the board, you are liable for that. You are running the company. You are supposed to make sure that the books, the accounting, everything else is square. When you sign up, that hasn't changed over, 100, 200 years of this country. You're still liable for it. They're coming after the commissioners, not Dan Sickles. Dan Sickles stands up. I like this. That's why I'm going into such detail about it. Dan Sickles tells the comptroller, no. Don't go after them. I'm the chairman. If anybody stands for it, it's me. If you're going to come after somebody, come after me. And Dan Sickles bars his neck for that. Now, you could argue he's 93 years old. What's he going to do? You could probably argue that, as you're about to see, that he considers himself a war hero, But, he stands for the dead. That's beyond a doubt. But he always managed to ease out. From across the nation, once this hit the newspapers, came support. Carlson's still up there? Helen Longstreet wrote and offered to raise money. Carlson didn't have that one. He'll be going back to his files right now. A gentleman from Ohio offered to pay the entire debt, and Sickles' son Stanton put up $5,000 of his own money, bringing the total down to $23,000. Long story short, a $30,000 surety, if I'm saying that right, surety bond. Surety. Can't see my lawyer over there in the middle of the crowd to tell me something. Well, let's just sue somebody. Was arranged for him. The bond was arranged for him and the sheriff who knew Dan personally. So when the sheriff came to the house to place him under arrest, you're talking about a 93-year-old man here, ladies and gentlemen. Dan Sickles, he knew he was coming, and the tabloids knew he was coming, and all the reporters gathered in front of this Fifth Avenue mansion to see the old man arrested for embezzlement. The sheriff, so everybody's there. The sheriff simply comes into the living room. He takes Dan Sickles. Let me see. Stand up for me. I ain't got your T-shirt on. Thank you. Here's T-shirt man, everybody. Here it is. You applause for him. Go ahead. He makes a T-shirt over there right here. He's always got that Yankee hat on too. Why he ain't come over for dinner. But he comes, he goes up to Sickles and he simply grabs Sickles' wrist and he says, "General Sickles, I hereby place you under arrest." And he says, and then Sickles posts bond without ever leaving his home. So, I forget, thank you. He goes to, so the sheriff is standing there. It's very awkward, he's friends with him. So one more thing was left to be done. The sheriff apologetically had to ask for the $5.29 fee for the bond. Ah, yes, the general said. Eleanor Wilmerding, Eleanor, please get me $5.29. And you know what the housekeeper said?
You don't have it.
Yes, dear. Ooh, I tell you what, my house is dirty. Wilmerding. Over there, we gotta have to get us some come over. Help us, aren't we, ladies? We all over by ourselves, starving to death. Huh? It's terrible. I thought y'all were tired of Daddy's cooking. Not good enough. Not good enough to get a stepmom, huh? I'm gonna conclude here. I'm close to concluding, but I want y'all to check this out right here. You know, these are the, we have today, ladies and gentlemen, in 2024, going into, how many years is it now since the battle? 161 years after the Battle of Gettysburg, and the vision which Sickles foresaw, this park and everything. I mean, I picked on him a lot. Now, he's fun to pick on. He's got great stories and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But in the end, what he built, which he had a large proportion in doing, it still stands today. And I wanted to basically close with one of the last speeches that Dan Sickles ever did in his life. He lived for a long time. So I think it captures, this quote here, captures what I think Sickles wanted to achieve here at the park. Now, you make your own judgments. I don't, you're the audience, so, It's quote, "It is sometimes said that it is not wise to perpetuate the memories of civil war. And such was the Roman maxim." I say that one right? "But our civil war was not a mere conspiracy against a ruler, semicolon. It was not the plot of some militarist to oust a rival from power. It was no pronunciamento." Where'd the lawyer go? Y'all know that. "The conflict that raged from 1861 to 1865 was a war of institutions and systems and politics." There's General Sickles. There's the high water mark right here. That carriage coming up, pretty cool, isn't it? I would imagine, if I'm looking at this right, this is roughly in the area where that Ambrose Wright iron tablet, Confederate tablet is on the Confederate side. I think that's roughly where that is. General Sickles in his carriage right there. That's just cool. I can't, yeah, and there's your marker right there. Marker. So, where was I? "The conflict that raged from 1861 to 65 was a war of institutions and systems and politics. It was a revolution ranking in importance with the French Revolution of the 18th century and with the English Revolution of the 17th century, and universal in its beneficent influence upon the destinies of this country, and ineffaceable, y'all don't know it either, in the footprints it left upon the path of our national progress. For all of us, the blue and the gray, it was our heroic age. The memories of such a war are as indestructible as our civilization. The names of Lincoln and Lee and Grant and Jackson never can be blotted from our annals. The valor and fortitude and achievements of both armies, never surpassed in any age, demand a record in American history. And now that time and thought, common sense and common interest have softened all the animosities of war, we may bury them forever, while we cherish and perpetuate as Americans the immortal heritage and honor of belonging to a republic that became imperishable when it became free." Right there. You can applaud for Sickles. Give Sickles a round of applause. This is, before I conclude, I got one more paragraph. This is the Rogers house. This no longer stands on the battlefield. I forget what happened, when it burned or what happened to it. But there is an iron tablet that's on the Emmitsburg Road, and that is I don't know what I put it near. It's between the Spangler farm and the Sherfy farm. It was right on the road. But anyway, Sickles is watching a reenactment of Pickett's Charge. In there, and that is happening right there. Now, he was so old, not to show you he was cutting cartwheels, but he was actually, newspaper reporters said he would nod off during and he would come to, which whenever I see this picture, this is what I think about. Whoa! That's what he looks like to me, It was pretty cool. Yeah. That's Mrs. Wilmerding, that's right. All right, one last thing, we'll conclude. And after the 1913 reunion was over, and the field started to grow quiet again, that's on the Rogers house, and him signing autographs right there. How'd you like to have that? And the field started to grow quiet again. Sickles had himself driven around for one last look at his beloved monuments. In the words of Edgecombe Pynchon, Sickles gazed upon, quote, the lordly Empire State monolith with its surmounting figure of victory, the cupola of the Excelsior Brigade monument, and the bold statues of Greene and Slocum, Hancock and Reynolds, encircling about them the memorials of 85 New York regiments and batteries, many of them under his command, that had served and suffered with him that day. Could it be a half century ago that this occurred? Suddenly Twitchell, his assistant walking beside him, said in 1913, Dan, I never realized it before, but in all this, right here, there is no monument to you. Only that plaque on the pediment of the state shaft. With the fleeting sweetness that was much part of him as his crusty dynamism and determination, the general smiled up at him, and he said to Twitchell, he said, never mind, Joe. All this is monument enough, isn't it? Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Sickles and the New York Monument Commission. Thank you very much. Right there. I don't know where that is. All right, we're going to do our usual thing. I just had to have a picture of it, though. Well, hello, Chocolate Milk. How are you, darling? What we're going to do is we're going to allow, the building is closing at 4, so I can't stay as long as I normally do. But I'm going to give our usual routine. We're going to cut the cameras. I'm going to allow whoever wants to leave for 5 minutes to leave, and then I'll take questions for 30. But I cannot hold the staff up here today. They've read me the riot act about not doing that. Right? Talk about Lloyd. Who's back there?
Not a partnership.
You married a lawyer?
I'm a civilian.
You know what Mark Twain said in Hal Holbrook's Mark Twain Tonight? He was talking, well, I saw this lawyer, and he had both of his hands in his pockets. So think of that, a lawyer's hands in his own pockets.
Whoa.
Words to that.
Well, all right.
That's all I'll say.
My lawyer told me that how did she say that? She said a good settlement beats a great trial.
Sometimes your pockets have more in them.
Oh, Justin. Oh, yeah. They just want the money. Did you enjoy your ride here?
Yeah.
Was it smooth?
I just came from the borough.
Oh, you did? Was it smooth?
Yeah.
It ought to be. I pay for every pothole out there, by God. No tax increase. According to Matt, I pay for it all. All right, what we got? What kind of questions we got? I was trying to say, I don't know if I came across the wrong way, that what I mean by lawyers is that, not in the sense, I envy lawyers in the sense that, some type of work that they do and the way that they're trained and so forth. But when I pick up a history book that's written by a lawyer, which I won't name any, but there's one out right now on Gettysburg, I automatically, I'm not saying this is 100%, but I automatically watch it with a sense of, I don't know, kind of with one eye open, because lawyers generally are out to prove the case. When a historian goes into a table, I'm not saying historians aren't like this either, but a historian, in theory, should go and lay the facts out on the table and let the facts take them to where the story goes, right? Or the story taking them to the fact, however you want to look at it. If a lawyer would set out and he's looking to prove a point, so he or she makes the facts conform to the point, if that makes sense. In other words, a historian should be, as much as possible, which is a hard thing to do, a true historian should remove all bias as much as they can. A true historian will say things that they don't exactly want to say, or they might not believe, but they think it's relevant to it. A lawyer does not introduce facts that does not help their case, right? So when you get to writing like when you get to writing like a book or something, a lawyer will take the text, and we had a former lawyer that worked here, and he wrote a little book on Gettysburg, portion of a little something on Gettysburg, and he was bad with the ellipses. I said, this makes sense and it fits your point if you keep the ellipses in the sentence. If you put the whole sentence back in there, it doesn't mean anything what you're saying. Right here, you see what they did. So anyway, what does it really matter? What would you rather be? Would you rather be a broke historian or a rich lawyer? I mean, which one do you want to be? Which one? I'll take the lawyer any day. Will Rogers once said, if it wasn't for lawyers, we wouldn't need lawyers. Or did you ever hear the joke? One time there was a broke lawyer in this small town. He had nothing to do. Nothing. Making nothing. But one day, another lawyer moved to town, and then what was in town? Two rich lawyers. Not one broke one. What we got? Any questions I left out?
So what else was Sickles doing besides his various affections with women? What else was he doing during these time periods? He can't be occupying all of his time with.
Somebody once told me, I don't know if this is exactly 100%, but and I want to put this in the program, but not formally, but they said that Sickles always reminded them of Thurston Howell III from Gilligan's Island, if you don't remember, right? And he had, in other words, he had that air about him. When you watch Gilligan's Island again, Sickles would have that air about him. Something that would, that's the type person he is. I mean, he's eating off a real plate every night. He didn't do that. Yes, sir.
When you showed us the wigwam, did you want to say a few words about him as a Tammany man?
Oh, well, going back, I don't know if I can go back and get you that much detail on it, but basically the 42nd New York, where the gentleman is referring to, is the Indian is placed, I should have said this, sir, very good question. The Indian is placed on the monument because it was the Tammany Regiment. And they went to war, or maybe it was pre-war, maybe you can correct me, but they were known as the Tammany Braves. And so when they came about to erecting their monument, they wanted something unique. And so what could be better than an Indian? I mean, who else has got an Indian? So they put it up. There's two things that stand out to me about that monument, though, right? One, New York Indians never lived in a teepee. It's too blasted cold. I mean, they quickly found out what's called a cabin, okay? They don't live in buckskin teepees with 40-mile-an-hour sub-zero temperature. God, no, that don't work right there, okay? The second thing, is, it is the only monument on a battlefield that shows a belly button. Thank you. Anything else you want me to say about it? But Tammany Hall, let me know if I answer your question. Tammany Hall was a political machine in New York City, and Dan Sickles was part of that political machine. Now, things I wouldn't say, because it wasn't the purpose of the talk was, but since we're on the subject of lawyers, I can't pronounce the guy's name anyway, but it was an Italian gentleman. The gentleman that taught Sickles law, remember, you didn't go to law school. You were taught by a lawyer back then. You learned in a law office. The gentleman that taught Sickles law, it was his daughter that Sickles married the first time. And she was apparently pregnant at the time that they got married in 1852 or 1853 or something like that. Parents were totally against it, the whole 9 yards, and I guess they got presented a situation they had no choice in. But I believe they were maybe the second time they were married in St. Patrick's Cathedral. Is that New York?
Yes.
Right, St. Patrick's. Yeah, I believe they were married in St. Patrick's Cathedral right there. But you have to, going back to the murder, which I touched on with the girls, you have to remember at the time, Teresa Sickles' wife was, early 20s when that occurs. Sickles is never there. He's constantly, he's for an example, for a year or two, he's with the American legation to Great Britain. I mean, he's just not there. And there you have Philip Barton Key, who is the district attorney of Washington, and according to Frank Leslie's Illustrated News, going over the trial, was a good-looking man, very handsome, and he had a way with women. And what gets Sickles in the background there is that Sickles consented. Most people don't remember this. Sickles consented for Philip Barton Key to take his wife to all these social engagements. Sickles gets a letter saying that you got some other mule kicking in your stall. And he takes that letter and he goes over to Keyes and he confronts him with it. And Keyes, on his honor as a gentleman, swears to Sickles, not General, Mr. Congressman Sickles, that there's nothing happening. And Sickles believes him. Now, let's say, I don't know, I'd have to look up dates, but let's say 6 months later, Sickles gets another note. And it says, it's got more detail in it this time. And apparently Keyes, according to Frank Leslie, I don't know if this has been verified, but when Keyes' autopsy was conducted, you know this now, they found an anonymous note in Keyes' pocket, in his jacket pocket, saying, you need to knock off this affair with Mrs. Sickles. Everybody knows what you're doing. And so I don't know when he got the note and how all that lined up, but Mr. Sickles looked out the window and saw Philip Barton Key out there a day or two, or maybe the day of, he received that second anonymous note. And that dude, he killed him. Went out there and killed him. After he got a detailed confession from his wife, written confession, which was introduced into court. So it's premeditated. Oh, it's premeditated. And Keyes, I guess, just showed up and gave him the excuse, I don't think, but let's talk about post-war Sickles, what we're supposed to be. I don't think that ever bothered Sickles. They said that one time Sickles was at the opera or a play or something in New York City, and Mr. Philip Barton Key's son, this is years and years later, who grown into a man, was there at the play. And observers said that once both men found out who the other one was, that they just kept staring at each other the whole play. Can you imagine meeting the man that killed your daddy? Go ahead.
Your whole gist, kind of what you came to at the end.
Yeah.
He himself was not actually stealing the money, but he put himself forward and saying, I'm responsible.
So when I originally started this program,
He's still here.
here comes the boss. When I originally started this program, I wanted to go to New York State, to the archives, and pull the New York Monuments Commission papers and see where the discrepancy was. Where are the receipts missing? Where did the $28,000 go? Do some forensic investigation. Does the lawyer enjoy that over? Forensic investigation.
Not lawyer, accounting.
Okay, accounting.
Thank you.
Forensic investigation. But you can pay lawyers a lot of money to do accounting too. They'll just hire somebody else. No, hear me correctly. I'm not saying this is because of Sickles. I'm just telling you what happened. There are so many people this could be attributed to. I doubt it's Dan Sickles. But when I contacted the state of New York, they said that there was a fire. And all the state records burned up. Everything. The whole warehouse burned up. And with that, all the records of the New York Monuments Commission. So I'm not saying that's the motive for that fire. Who had the motive? I mean, I just go start, but who done it? Stuff like that. But that's what happened. I couldn't ascertain. Now, in the back of my mind, it could be sloppiness. You've got 7 or 8, I don't know how many commissioners there were for New York, but let's say 7 or 8, 9, something like that. You constantly got people pulling off the same till, right? So it could very well be that you didn't put in a receipt this time, Jim didn't put in a receipt this time, Joe didn't do it that time, and so that adds up. It could also be with Sickles being the commissioner. He would go out. Sickles probably felt that New York State should pay for his services. And so as an outreach, I don't know if he'd say it this way, but as an outreach, the way I picture it is if you were a broke soldier, a broke veteran, and you came up to Dan Sickles and you said, General, I don't have anything to eat tonight or something, or I'm in Gettysburg, I don't have a place to stay. If you served in the 3rd Corps, maybe even the Union Army, come on. And when the bill comes, guess what Sickles pulls out of his back pocket? He ain't pulling out Dan Sickles' visa. He's pulling out the New York Monuments Commission visa. And he's paying for these things, over time. Lodging, transportation, food. And that could attribute to the money. But then again, he could have just stolen. All right? I can't dismiss that. It is interesting he borrowed his neck for that. But, I don't know. I don't guess we'll ever know without the records. Could be sloppy, could be intentional. I don't know. What are you looking for? What we lost?
My phone. When I walked out, it
Call it.
was right. 496.
What we got?
Yeah, the picture of the plaza has a bit of Central Park in it.
It did overlook Central Park,
Yeah,
actually.
him in Central Park and collecting animals for the zoo. Whether or not seen a little bit about that, I was wondering whether you had come across more on that.
The dues for Central Park?
No, the zoo.
Oh, I don't know.
I
I can't even tell you if the plaza's still standing. Is the plaza still standing? It is?
But I've seen a little bit about him being involved with getting Central Park established.
Let me ask my own dumb question. I would think Central Park is before the war. Is it after the war? I don't know.
Takes some credit for creating something.
Oh, of course.
Jim's book, he takes credit for creating Central Park. As a center, he established.
On trips to South America to collect animals to the zoo, wondering whether you came across anything more on that.
I never knew he went to collect what?
Animals to the zoo.
I didn't hear that. The only time I ever heard about that is Lincoln dispatched him to Central America in '65 to see if Central America was viable to dispatch the emancipated slaves. You know, when they, yeah. So I don't know about him gathering animals or whatnot. But you know, he was doing something. He came from money. He made money, and he blew it all. It just didn't seem to faze him or the princess at all. I mean, they just light it up, you know, burn $100 bills here.
Maybe he thought that since he'd been spared at Gettysburg, you know, that was his brush with death and everything.
Well, let me back up and say what I meant to say a while ago. You just prompted me. When the sheriff came in and grabbed his wrist, Dan Sickles took out of his pocket a letter that was already prepared. And in that letter, he told the sheriff, he made sure that the sheriff knew that he was arresting the hero of Gettysburg. And that therefore, since he was the reason that the Union Army won the Battle of Gettysburg, therefore, if you extrapolate, as a lawyer would do, if you extrapolate that, I've been watching that whole testimony on TV this week. I'm all about some questioning now, you know, and oh yeah, I'm all fit to go to law school now, but probably not act like them, but he extrapolates that to mean that he's the savior of the nation. That's what he thinks. That's what he truly thinks. He thinks that he did the right thing and that George Meade was the one that was going to cost him battle. I have to say this because he repeats it so many times. When a lawyer looks at somebody for truthfulness, you're looking for the witness to repeat the story over and over again, pretty much the same way. You're looking for consistency. And consistently, Sickles says, I did the right thing. So, in my belief, he believes it, what he does. He never backs off that. And if you got any sense of the type of person he was, he doesn't seem like the person that would entertain such things either. I mean, he is a very hard man. His wife, first wife, dies of tuberculosis, I believe. Basically, she was heartbroken by being slandered in the press. She, in the middle of that trial, not in the middle of the trial, but while Sickles is in jail, there was a minister which was a liaison between the two. This couple that was estranged, obviously, after killing the guys, your wife's lover. But she said via the minister that she could bear it no longer without her wedding ring. And so Sickles took that ring and broke it and sent it back to her, saying that the bonds of matrimony were permanently, but then he took her back. But she dies in like 67, 68, and then his daughter, who apparently developed a drinking or drug addiction or something like that, Sickles just laid her aside. I don't even think he went to the funeral when she died at a premature age. And she wanted to marry, we wonder about this, she wanted to marry some good-looking guy while they were over in Spain, and Sickles forbade it. You wonder if she'd have made it, I don't know. What else we got? We had a question.
Yeah, I was going to ask something that's going to require, I guess, some speculation, but we won't know. But Longstreet's comment that you read, the complimentary comment that you wrote,
Yeah.
It seemed to me like that's just an opponent showing respect for the headache that he was caused. And I think Sickles hangs his hat a lot on. I forced Longstreet's hand that day. That's why I'm the savior of the nation. But what's missing there, and it's debatable, is he also forced Meade's hand. And who did he force more, Meade or Longstreet, by his actions? And I'm curious if Longstreet could have known what we know now about what Meade had to go through, and as a general, what he would have said in that context, or was he just posturing before he wrote?
Okay, a couple of things on that. Let me answer it a different way. Meade died shortly after the war, like the early 1870s, right? 1870, 71, 72, something like that. But before he dies, he writes a letter privately to an author, historian, criticizing Sickles for his move at Gettysburg. And that letter, Meade's a gentleman, he don't want that published, but it's published posthumously. I believe it might be in Battles and Leaders, right there. But some people would say that Sickles doesn't get court-martialed because he loses that leg. How do you court-martial a general that just lost a leg in the service of his country? The optics of it are bad. Now, where it wouldn't have looked bad is when what Meade can't see coming is Sickles. Meade does away with Sickles. How do you do away with a general? Well, you can't fire a general, right? So what do? Just like a corporation, what Meade does after the battlefield is downsize. All right? So when Sickles recovers from that hip amputation, he comes back and his position has been eliminated. The Third Corps is no more. So there is no job for Sickles. And that's when Sickles brings the knives out. That's when Historica shows up in the papers. That's when the Congressional Republicans, Joint Committee of the Conduct of the War gets involved, and Meade has to testify, and Sickles testifies, Butterfield, Chief of Staff, all of them get involved in that. That's all kicked off by that Meade and Sickles feud right there. But yeah, I think, let me know if I'm answering your question, or ask me again if I didn't answer. I think George Meade was incredulous that somebody could not deploy in a straight line. But Meade is a professional soldier. I don't mean to beat this thing into the ground, but I basically have today. Sickles, once again, sir, is a lawyer. And only a lawyer can argue the definition of a straight line. Okay? Okay, I mean, that's simply it. I mean, a lawyer would say, well, that's not really what this is open to interpretation.
But that's why I thought that Longstreet's comments were curious, because
Longstreet,
I think, would understand what you just said.
well, Longstreet writes the comments because at the time, at the end of his life, Longstreet had been like the dog on the porch that had been kicked on too much. And he's tired of it. And you can only whoop on a dog so long. I found that the hard way as a kid right there. They will bite you eventually, you know. And I think Longstreet was tired of being criticized. And, you know, he became a Republican. He became a Catholic. He said bad things about General Lee. All three things are very bad in the South. You know, you just don't do that, you know. So, and he gets old. Longstreet got a loose mouth on him. He says a lot of impertinent things, like Lee's thirst for blood on the third day had not been quenched or something. I mean, you know, when you write that sentence, you just ask him for it. What message do you have to deliver? Where's your sister?
Right there.
You gotta go? You ready to go? You ready to go? All right, you gotta go. Any more questions? Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
One of the things that I find is kind of ironic is that Longstreet is basically blamed for the loss of Gettysburg by the South.
Uh-huh.
And Sickles is trying to take credit for the victory for the North, when neither of those things are really true. But that's how they came down in history, and I know I've spent a lot of time in my life thinking, well, Sickles kind of screwed up Lee's plans. And that's why they won the battle, because what he did, he went out there and he missed them up. They go, whoa, what's going on here? And everything gets screwed up. Well, that's not really how it came down, but that's kind of what we were taught.
Well, okay, so let me just tell you what Sickles said, and this is where you gotta watch Dan Sickles, all right? So Sickles would make the claim that the reconnaissance over with Verdun, over where the amphitheater is, when I mentioned in the first of the program the Union monuments on the Confederate side, Sickles would argue that he uncovered Longstreet's movement to get into attack during that reconnaissance. That's what he would say. It was Anderson's division, that was Wilcox's Alabamians they were scraping at. But Sickles interpreted that as Longstreet coming in. Now, he changed that. I think that's a lot. I don't think he knew. I doubt they captured any Alabamians. It would surprise me. But he knew that, to me, and this is unprovable, sir, and I would not say this during the program, but to me, he Sickles, when that information comes back from that reconnaissance, Sickles is sitting there and he thinks in his mind he has no more time. The Confederates are about to occupy Peach Orchard, and if I'm going to make this move, I have to do it now. It's all based upon, a lawyer would love this too, it's all based upon what did he know and when did he know it. And at that point, I don't think he knew it. So in other words, sir, to say all this, look at Sickles' position at the Peach Orchard. And you look at the position when the Confederates are over here at the amphitheater, not when Longstreet is here, before Longstreet gets here. If the Confederates are over here to Sickles' right, behind the Sherfy farm, it's not that bad a position. It's when Longstreet goes into position that it becomes a bad position, because Sickles' left flank at Devil's Den is up in the air. Now Sickles would also, on that point, Sickles in New York at Gettysburg, you had to watch him. He's a lawyer. He's got a sleight of hand to him. He says in there, quote, "I covered Little Round Top by occupying Devil's Den." Now you'd have to know the terrain to get that sentence, what he just did right there, so it's a sleight of hand that he's doing. Are they cutting?
Well, I'm not advocating that Sickles won the battle.
Good, you might get out of here alive.
That's an old thought, but I just think it's ironic that Longstreet gets the blame for Gettysburg when he shouldn't, and Sickles tried to take credit for the victory when he almost blew the whole battle. I mean, Meade spent the rest of the day reestablishing his line, is basically what he did.
Yeah, he did. He almost blew the whole battle for him.
Yeah, he had to pull everybody
And
off.
let's cut to the chase. What's most important to me? Not most important, but who I feel the sorriest for. All right, it's his men.
Yeah.
That's 50% casualty. That whole corps was destroyed in that move. Not to mention the people that had to come bail him out of it.
Yeah.
But I think though, once again, that's Sickles. Sickles would never tell you that he didn't have enough experience in 1863 command that corps. What it looks like to me is it's a competent man, an intelligent man, a very smart man, but he's in a job which he's over his head. He's only fought one battle at that level, and now the high ground in front of him. In other words, a professional military officer would know that with 10 to 12,000 men, you can't occupy the ground in which you're going to try to do. But Sickles would not know that. Now, he wouldn't like that statement, but in my opinion, that's where his lack of experience comes into play.
But ironically, again, on this, because it was at Chancellorsville 2 months before that he got bombarded from Hazel Grove, which he had that position, he moved down. And when he looks at the Peach Orchard, he says, I gotta have that ground, I'm gonna get killed out here.
Yeah, that's what he's doing.
So
a lot of
it's
people
kind of
attribute
a
that.
logical thing.
Sickles is learning on the job, is what I'm telling you, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what he's doing. You all right? They're making ugly faces at me up here, and I want you to know that people coming in, and next time they're going to tell me, in Dale Earnhardt's words, they're going to tell me I'm number one. All right, thank you. Everything's done. Stuff Writer has done it again. The amazing Stuff Writer has appeared out of nowhere just to save you right here.